it's such a treat for us to have a live audience and get to see this. So we'd love to hear any comments or questions that you have for either of us. Okay. Pike Island is still owned by the DNR, and there's been some little actions. Was it last summer I heard that you had a conversation with some people at the state about this, saying that you'd really like that island back? And there have been thousands of acres of land in Minnesota turned over to tribes in the last 5 years. I have a list of all the various things that have happened for various reasons, but it's exciting times. With the political changes now, it's going to be very difficult, I think, but it needs to happen, and I think it's coming. That's my take on it.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that one island is that it was never part of a treaty. So even if you Google map that place, it says uncategorized because it's not owned by anyone. So it'd be really simple to be able to give it back, but it is a birthing island, one of the many islands that were used for birthing. We might be able to show like a 15-minute clip about that island, but it's a really important place, and it would be such a lovely gesture to have that back. And it's managed by the Department of Natural Resources, who all Native people fall under that umbrella. We are the natural resources in America, so we're hoping that that happens.
I think it has made some awareness, and I think what, like I said, people don't know this story, even especially the people who are making the decisions. They don't know this, so hopefully it's made an impact on legislatures, but definitely it has made an impact on people.
Talk about your Bedote tours.
Oh, so she's asking me to talk about Bedote tours. So we spend a whole day it began with K through 12 students who learn the history. We could say it's Minnesota history, but it's the Minnesota history that includes Indigenous people, which is left out of our K-12 education. So we started taking kids on the tour and teaching them about that history on the land, because the land has an energy, right? I was talking about that earlier. So we've done that for 12 years now, and it kind of grew and it morphed over the years. People would hear about this tour, and it became, okay, we're just going to take all teachers on this tour. And then now we take philanthropic organizations to say less than 1% of your giving, which is huge in Minnesota, very philanthropic, a lot of money given away. So if you take philanthropic groups on a tour to help them understand a history they don't know about, they're more likely to give money to Native organizations and people who really need that, because less than 1% of their monies goes to Native organizations. We are invisible. It's purposeful. We're left out of the narrative. So really, for 12 years, we've been putting ourselves back in the narrative. And, Rita really helped to do that with this film.
Anybody in here filmmaking or have done any filmmaking? One of the things I learned is the power of this medium. So we've been on PBS for 5 years, public television, and Anthony just told me yesterday that you can tell on the PBS site how many views you've had. So this film has had over 1 million views in 5 years. That's, and it's been very good for starting community conversations about uneasy topics.
So one of the things is uh, this film has helped show the similarities that people have. A lot of times, the way communities work are to be posed against each other, right? Oppressed communities are pitted against each other. Here's a little bit of funding, fight for it, stuff like that. So when we're talking about something so critical, experiences so critical of two groups of people, it brings them closer together because we have, as Indigenous peoples in Minnesota, we have a lot of experience in language revitalization. And what does that look like? What does healing look like? How can you bring those ways of knowing back? And we have that now to share with people in Minnesota who are just wanting so desperately to learn something about their own culture. Because, like Rita said, I've been 19 years or many years in K-12 education, and I've never learned one day of Irish culture. And that's how it is in America. So
Celtic Junction, which Patrick is very involved with in St. Paul, Minnesota, does a lot for Irish culture, and he and that organization have really, really worked hard to build relationships with Native people and with tribes. And so there's been collaborations happening, and that's really exciting.
And another very interesting thing is there are college classes that talk about the impact of colonization. And so we've been visiting in college classes, specifically Dakota, or Native and Irish, with the Native and Irish teachers who are teaching the students what that looks like and then visiting here. So that's also been really exciting. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for that
very much.
reminder.
So
It was a wonderful film.
Another point of information, to follow on Carol's point of information. So A.E. Russell, on his last visit, 4 visits he made to the United States from 1934 to 1935, was working with Henry Wallace, Secretary of Agriculture in FDR's UDL administration. He was working with a guy called John Collier, who wanted him to go down and talk to the Navajo, New Mexico, but A.E. Russell's health was failing. He died in 1935. So they saw a sage-like figure like Russell, who'd be trying to revive Ireland's culture and heritage, and also cooperative farming and cooperative humanitarian activity. They saw that as congruent with what they were trying to understand, but even though they were often horribly neglectful in their treatment of Indigenous people, they saw that A.E. Russell could have had very productive collaboration. And if so you guys are kind of filling a kind of a gap that's been waiting to be filled in the history around AE. It's not an accident that you're here. AE is always with us, helping us kind of fulfill some of the legacy that was interrupted by his untimely passing.
thank you, Patrick. That's great.
I always say that he was my teacher that day. You know, you raise your kids and you know, teach them all these things, but he was my teacher that day because, and I'm another reason why I love to have the young people around, because, you know, as we get older, we kind of aren't as open-minded, right? And when he said that, I was like, God, he's right? Here we focus on the trauma and we don't look at the bigger, more beautiful things. So thank you. I feel the same way.
Good question. Well, as you saw in the film, my brother was quite unhappy with me, and after we had these conversations, and we both really learned something about listening to each other. He was trained as a lawyer, and so arguing is just part of the way he communicates. And I knew from the beginning that I couldn't argue with him because you can't win when you argue. So I decided to just listen and not try to respond. And he started doing the same thing with me. So we did that with each other. It was powerful because I didn't think there was a way through this for us. And we did. We worked through it and worked through it. And then I offered him this book called North Country, which is a alternate picture of the history of Minnesota. And he refused to read it. And about 6 months later, I could tell he'd still been thinking about this and working it through. He asked me for the book, and he did read it. And so he's moved, and I think I've moved from sticking with him across that divide, you know. So we're all doing well. We're trying to keep my sister and her brother-in-law alive. In the last 6 months, they've had very rough times, and so we're working together very closely. So we feel pretty pleased.
And you know what I say about her brother was he was the rock star in that film. He really was, because it shows that's Minnesota nice. That's what it looks like in families. Somebody doesn't want to talk about it, somebody does, and they worked through it. And I think it was really good and healthy modeling to see that, you know, that they were able to get through that challenging conversation. So I always said I think he was the star of the movie, really.
What they taught me was how interested they were in a family conversation about real things and about history that they'd never seen before in our family. They were just fascinated by it. They were eager. They wanted more. And I didn't realize that the younger people want this. They want the truth. They want a chance to wrestle with things, you know. So I learned a lot from that. And the other young people, they're all so pleased with their role in the film, you know, so they get to show it in their classrooms, and you know, so I think it has made a difference.
Aww. I didn't know that. There was a question back here. It would remain just the way it is. So this island is surrounded by water. So we think of these islands as really about the womb, which is why that's, you know, we connect it as a ceremony of birth that way. And that's why it is our creation story. We emerge from that place. So no, we don't want to build on it. We just want it to be ours. The Dakota were exiled out of the state in, was it 2012? There was a small attempt to welcome us back, but we don't own any property there. There's 11 tribal nations there, but the Isanti, my people, were never able to go back there. I mean, able to come back here and actually own property. So no, we just like it back. We'd like to be able to harvest our medicines. You know, just to harvest all of the medicines that grow around that island are medicines that heal women from birthing. So it stops the blood when the cord is cut. Lots of really important medicines grow there around those islands. And so we'd like to be able to harvest without filing for a permit, you know, things like that. So it would stay the way it is. It would be used to help tell the history of the people who have lived in a place for 14,000 years, because our language reflects the medicines, it reflects the star science, all of the stars. We have all of that. And one thing about in America is that we do not tell the indigenous history for thousands of years that you learn here. We know about Greek civilization. We know about the Chinese dynasties, right? It's important when you make decisions about place, if you know the history. America, nope, started in 1492 when Columbus did not ever discover anything, right? Because there were, how do you discover a place that's, inhabited by millions and millions of people with over 500 different languages? So we just want to start with that one little island.
Pretty typical because of what we were taught, we were taught one narrative about people coming to this country which was empty and coming to live here. Like there was no it was purposeful. Let's erase the story of the people who were here.
There is one really famous book in geared toward fourth grade, and it's, what's the name of it? Little House on the Prairie. Have you heard of it? Right? First book, first chapter, first paragraph. We are moving to Minnesota. By the time we get there, the Indians should be gone. That's the reference to the native people. And that's, you're already teaching fourth graders that. No question about where they go or that they span 7 states. No, just that by the time we get there, they should be gone, right? And so that's in it. Large amount of ignorance, sorry. I do. I absolutely do. In fact, we got some funding last year. There's a group called Birth Justice Coalition or collaboration. And there was, because of the health disparities of Black and Indigenous women, they gave a lot of money. And so we're trying to figure out how do we practice birthing as a ceremony, as a personal experience, rather than this medical craziness. I don't know how it is here, but being able to give birth as ceremony instead of that. So it's very possible that we're able to do that. Like Dr. Stately said, they're working on building or even figuring out, how does that happen? Is it just at home? Do we bring the midwives? How does that look? But we've made some great progress in the Twin Cities area, which is the largest urban Indian center in the country. So we just have a large population of Native people there. So I hope so.
Una, did you have a question?
Yes, something that you said in the film that really impacted when you said that you went into the system to see how you could disrupt it, which is a really good thing to do with any system, especially the education system. I think Irish children were not given their own history either. I think the schools didn't know how to deal with the Irish history. So in most cases, they either gave the standard history or they completely ignored it. And that we are still in a primary school situation where they have a curriculum topic, which is the world around us. And that world around us is Egypt and the pyramids. And we have within our own South Armagh structures from Neolithic times, which are older than the pyramids. And the first word around them, and for children's confidence, is where they're from themselves. So I go in with each piece of school curriculum and I put the local into school curriculum. Because that gives confidence, it gives a sense of your place, it gives a sense of yourself, and it raises young people to the top. Yes. Yeah, and it's about honesty.
Yeah. Well, the children can take it. It's the adults that can't. It's true.
They don't know how to deal with it.
They trust us to tell them the truth. They do, and they can take it. So, but we don't tell them the truth. But tell them that story on the land and the place where their ancestors were, and it lights a fire, and they'll take it from there. I believe that strengthens that next generation to keep telling that story and knowing who they are. Because we come from some awesome people. Right? It's true.